The Hollow Wood, Book 1, Whispers. Chapter 1, The Wooden Watcher. The morning after Willow first stepped into the Hollow Wood, the world no longer felt like hers. She woke on a bed of moss and fallen leaves, the earthy scent of damp soil filling her lungs, shaft of sunlight pushing through the canopy in long golden fingers, dust drifting lazily like sleepy spirits. Everything was hushed, as if the trees were holding their breath. She sat up slowly, brushing pine needles from her hair. Her satchel was untouched, though a ring of stone had been placed around it in the night, not by her. Not alone, she thought. The compass still spun in dizzy circles, useless, but strangely comforting. She packed it away and stood, muscles stiff from the cold, as she turned toward the deeper woods. She saw him again, the creature. It stood 20 paces away, silent among the roots of an old ash tree. Its limbs were tall and narrow like branches, bark clothed its body like armor, and its face, still and carved, stared at her with hollow black eyes, its antlers curled like Willow Thorn, and moss hung from its shoulders like a forgotten king's cloak. Willow's breath coughed, but she didn't run. Instead she bowed, a slow, respectful motion. The creature tilted its head, just slightly, then it turned and walked. Its steps soundless, its body weaving between trees like mist. Not hurried, not hiding, just waiting for her to follow. And she did. She stepped carefully, watching her footing as she followed deeper into the wood. The trees grew stranger here, older. Some bent in unnatural curves. Some had faces, not carved ones, but grown from the bark, expressions twisted in pain or laughter or longing. Willow awaited her gaze. She knew somehow it was impolite to stare. The creature led her to a clearing where time seemed to stop. A ring of standing stones, half swollen by moss, surrounded a hollow tree, whose trunk split into three like a thorn. Vines draped from its limbs, and a soft light pulsed from a crack in its bark. The creature walked to the tree, kneeled, and pressed a hand to the bark. The pulsing light brightened in response like a heartbeat. Willow watched, not daring to move. Then the creature stood and stepped aside, leaving the space open for her. She hesitated, but her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. When the world asks you to listen, don't talk, just listen. She stepped into the ring. The air grew heavy, her skin prickled. The heartbeat in the tree was not a sound, it was a feeling, like thunder held under the skin. Willow placed her hand on the bark. A pulse rushed through her, warm and aching and old. Images flickered behind her eyes, a village nestled in the woods, children dancing under lanterns, a fire in the dark, trees falling, screaming, and then silence. She stumbled back. Brief, shallow, heart racing. The creature was gone. She turned in a circle. Nothing. Just the ring, the tree, and the forest watching. But something had changed. The forest knew her now. And Willow, frightened, humbled, but somehow whole, whispered aloud for the first time in the hollow, "I'm listening." Chapter 2. The Language of Moss. Willow spent the next days wandering, watching and waiting. The hollow wood did not speak in words, it whispered in patterns. In the way branches leaned toward or away from a path, in the way birdsong stopped suddenly, in how moss grew only on one side of the stone. It was a quiet, layered language, one you learn not with your ears, but with your patience. On her second morning, Willow woke to find the moss near her shelter arranged in a strange spiral. At first she thought it was just wind or an animal, but as she kneeled to study the curling green lines, she noticed they formed a perfect circle around her fire pit. It was a message. "You're seen," she whispered. "Thank you," and traced one of the spirals with her finger. It felt warm. Then the rest of the moss. Not heated. Alive. From that day forward she began to test the forest. She laid stones in a line near her shelter and found them arranged in a curve the next morning. She hummed a song while picking berries, and the trees rustled in rhythm. Once she whispered a question into a hollow log. "What do you remember?" And hours later the wind carried back a faint child's giggle, even though no one else was there. The forest was answering her, but not everything was kind. One night Willow found a patch of moss near her bed. It was turning a sickly grey. No spiral, no warmth. The next morning a toad she had grown fond of lay dead beside it, its body dried out, as if the life had been drained from it. She buried it with care, and left 3 red berries by the grey patch as a peace offering. The moss slowly returned to grey by the evening. She buried it with care, and left 3 red berries by the grey patch as a peace offering. The moss slowly returned to green by the evening. From then on, Willow was more careful. She learned the rules. Never speak your full name aloud. Do not touch the stones with holes. Never walk the same path twice at night. Offer something before you take. Listen longer than you speak. And most importantly, never lie, not in the hollow. Lies turned to rot here. She saw it happen. One afternoon, a bird with golden feathers landed nearby and chirped sweetly. Willow, overjoyed, said, "You're the most beautiful thing I've seen in the forest." The bird cocked its head. The moss at her feet stiffened. She winced. It wasn't true, not quite. The moss spirals in the clearing, the heartbeat tree, they had been more beautiful. And as soon as the thought passed through her, the bird opened its beak and mimicked her voice back at her. "You're the most beautiful thing I've seen in the forest." Except it sounded wrong, like wet wood dragging across stone. Then it flew away, fast and silent. That night Willow found her own voice echoing through the trees, mocking her, whispering her false words back, wrapped and hollow. She apologized aloud beneath the stars. By dawn the forest was quiet again. Despite the eeriness, Willow didn't feel afraid. The forest wasn't punishing her, it was teaching her. It was alive and old and stubborn, but it wasn't cruel. It just didn't want to be misunderstood again. By the end of the week, Willow could read the forest's moods in the shape of ivy, in the lean of trees, in the way dew pooled on stone. She sat each evening by the heart tree, hand on the bark, listening to the echoing pulse. Sometimes she saw flickers of memory, children chasing fireflies, women in red cloaks lifting candles, voices laughing in a language she didn't know. She wasn't alone in the hollow wood anymore. She was becoming part of its story. Chapter 3. Bones Beneath the Stream. The stream at the edge of the hollow sang a strange, sad song. Willow found it one misty morning, drawn by the sound of water whispering over stone. Not babbling like normal streams, but murmuring, as if speaking secrets in a language just beyond her understanding. The water was clear and cold, and the smooth rocks below shimmered like polished teeth. She kneeled to drink, cupping her hands. That's when she saw it, a fragment of something white between the stones. At first she thought it was driftwood, but when she reached in and pulled it free, her breath caught. It was a piece of jawbone, too smooth to be an animal's, with small flat teeth still rooted in it. Human. She dropped it, and it splashed back into the stream, vanishing. The woods around her grew suddenly still. The whispering stopped. Even the birds held their breath. Something had changed. Willow stood slowly, heart pounding. She didn't run. Running never felt right here. But she backed away from the stream and turned in a wide circle around it. That night she returned to the heart tree. Troubled, she pressed her hand to the bark, hoping it might show her something. It did. This time the memory that came was clearer, not a flicker, but a vision. She stood in the village that once had been ghost-like and unseen. Children played in the dusk, their faces joyful. Lanterns swung from branches, painted with symbols of peace, of plenty. Music floated on the air, played on flutes carved from willow and reed. But at the village edge, near the same stream, a gathering formed. Tense, quiet, angry. A man in four-lined robes shouted at a woman with tangled black hair. The same woman Willow had seen in other memories, always near the heart tree. Her voice rose like wind, and though Willow couldn't understand the words, she felt them. Warning, pleading, refusal. The man lifted a torch. The vision dissolved into flame and screams and running feet. Willow gasped and stumbled back from the tree, her hand burning cold. Willow gasped and stumbled back from the tree, her hand burned cold where it had touched the bark. She didn't sleep that night. Instead she sat awake, listening to the stream in the distance, now quiet again. Almost too quiet. The next day Willow returned to the water, not to drink, to bury. She brought herbs she'd gathered, smooth river stones, and a small carving she had made of heart tree from a bit of driftwood. She placed them in the stream bed, where she'd found the jar along with a whispering promise. I will remember you. The water shimmered and for just a second she thought she saw the shape of a small child standing in the current, watching her with empty eyes, not angry, not sad, just waiting. Then it was gone. The night, the moss around her shelter bloomed in pale white blossoms she had never seen before, flowers shaped like tiny hands, each with 5 delicate fingers. The hollow had accepted her offering, but she knew now the forest carried grief as much as beauty, and its grief was ancient. Chapter 4. The Forgotten Shrine. The forest changed after the offering at the stream. Paths that once circled endlessly now led somewhere. Vines that tangled over stone now parted at her touch. The hollow wood was beginning to trust her, or test her. Willow wasn't sure which. She followed the pool of something unspoken, something talking behind her ribs. The trees here were ancient beyond counting, their trunks wide enough to hold a cottage. They whispered constantly, not in fear or warning, but in curiosity, as if they were remembering her. On the 4th day after the stream, she found the shrine. It was half swallowed by the earth, built into a hill like a buried chapel. The entrance was framed with bones, not threatening, but reverent. Each rib and femur had been cleaned and placed with care, like ivy pillars supporting the doorway. Moss and ivy had crept through the cracks and didn't dare cover the bones. Willow paused at the threshold. A warmth bloomed in her chest. Not hers. She stepped inside. The air grew cool. Still, silent. The only sound was the faint drip of water from somewhere deeper. The shrine walls were carved with spiral symbols and crude pictures. Trees with faces, suns with too many eyes, a woman holding a lantern with roots in her hair. At the center of the chamber stood a small stone altar, and behind it, the statue. It was crumbling, but clear, a figure cloaked in feathers and leaves. Hands outstretched, palms up, one eye was missing. The remaining one had been painted with something dark, something that hadn't faded. It stared at Willow with quiet knowing. In the statue's hands rested a withered wreath of vines, and tucked inside it a bone flute. She stepped closer, feeling that same tug beneath her sternum. Her hand hovered over the flute. "Do not take it lightly," a voice whispered. Willow spun around, but the chamber was empty. Then she realized the voice hadn't come from outside, it had come from the shrine itself. She turned back to the statue. The shadows behind it seemed deeper now. Breathing slowly, the voice came again, low and ancient, like wood groaning in the wind. The hollow gave her its voice once. She sang for the trees, for the dead, for the truth. She sang, and the fire came. Willow's fingers brushed the bone flute. It was cold, then warm. It fit her in her hand perfectly, as if it had waited just for her. The voice faded. She brought the flute to her lips and played a single note. The shrine shuddered. Moss bloomed along the walls in seconds. A carved spiral on the far stone flared with pale green light. A door cracked open, revealing a hidden passage lined with roots and soft light. Willow stepped through. What waited beyond was not danger, but memory. Portraits, burned into stone, names etched in spirals, offerings long since crumbled to a dust. A forgotten lineage, and in the center of the final chamber, a mirror. It showed the woman from the visions, wild-haired, eyes alight, holding the same flute Willow now carried around her. Villagers knelt behind her, trees bent toward her like worshippers. Beneath the mirror, in old forest tongue, the hollow keeper, she who sung. And scrawled faintly beside it, in faded ink she barely could read, Willow, her own name. Her legs gave way. She sat on the cold floor, heart pounding. She was not just a visitor here. She was part of the Hollow's blood. Chapter 5. The Hollow Keeper. The next morning the forest no longer felt unfamiliar, not because it had changed, but because she now knew its shape, the way she knew her own hands. Willow stood beneath the hot tree, the bone flute tied gently at her side with a strip of old cloth. Since playing the first note she had heard things, more things, footsteps where there was no path, a heartbeat echoing from the stones, words in her dreams that weren't hers, and always the pull, not forward, not backward, but inward. The forest wanted her to go deeper. She returned to the shrine. Now free of its roots, it pulsed gently with green light, a welcome. There she found the rope, feathers and woven bark, shaped not by hand but by age, hung carefully on a carved branch like a memory, left behind. When she touched it, the flute hummed at her side. She dressed without hesitation, and then she walked, not by trail, not by moss, signs or light, but by the rhythm of her own breath sinking with the hollows. She came to a hill she didn't remember, though the stones whispered her name. At the summit was a circle of dead trees, twisted but not broken, as if frozen in fear. In the center, an altar, no statue, no shrine, just stone, stained black. Willow stepped inside the circle, and the wind died. A shape rose from the altar, not a person, not an animal, something old and hollow and half-formed, with eyes that flickered like ash and a mouth that did not open to speak, but simply was. "Why have you come?" it asked. Though its face did not move, Willow raised her head. Her voice was steady. "I am the Hollow Keeper." The wind screamed. The shade recoiled, as if the name struck it, its form bent inwards, its voice cracking like dry bark. She broke the pact. She defied the flame. She stole the voice. Willow lifted the flute. She remembered the forest when no one else would. The shade hissed and burned for it. Willow brought the flute to her lips again. This time she did not play just a note. She played a song, Not one she knew, but one her hands remembered, a lullaby of roots and breath, of bones and birds, of storms and silence. It purred from her, as if the hollow itself was singing through her lungs. The shade shrieked and twisted. Its form unraveled into smoke, spiraling into the trees. The dead branches lit with gentle flame, green and gold, and did not burn, only glowed as if waking. The altar creaked, and underneath it, curled in the roots, lay bones wrapped in a red cloak. The woman from the vision, her ancestor, the first hollow keeper. Willow knelt and whispered, "I found you." The cloak crumbled to dust, and the roots gently curled around the bones, pulling them into the earth. From that place, a sapling sprouted in seconds, trembling with new life. Willow walked home in silence. The trees bent gently as she passed. The moss hummed under her feet, and in the sky above, the heart tree for the first time in century, stars bloomed in spiral. The forest was awake, and it remembered. The end of Book 1, Whispers.